Good afternoon. This is Writers Talking to Writers, and my guest today is Vida Penezic from Bowling Green, Ohio. When I say Bowling Green, she's also from LA. So welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Now, I know you have a book, and it's called Art for Hotels. Would you like to introduce something of your background that led to the book and just how this book came to be? I know it was published several years ago.
That's correct. The book is result of my experiences coming from Europe to America in the 80s. I came in 1986 to study popular culture in Bowling Green. And at that time, I intended to go back after I finished my master's degree, but I liked it very much. I continued on to the PhD. And then in the meantime, war broke out in Yugoslavia, and so one thing led to another, and I stayed here. The book is basically my response to this experience. When I first came to this country, I brought with me the picture of the world that I was raised with. That was the picture not only of what my country, then called Yugoslavia, looked like, but of the whole world. I thought we had a certain place in the world that the world acknowledged as our rightful place in it. When I came here, I realized that the way people in Bowling Green saw me had nothing to do with the way I saw myself or my country saw itself. They basically saw me as somebody coming from an oppressive communist culture who came to America for freedom. And that I was given many opportunities to talk about that. They would invite me and talk about emerging nations and talk about coming to America and finding freedom and just testifying to their own narrative about us. They were not open and could not hear my own version of it. And interesting thing is that's how I looked at them as well, because I thought their picture of the world is wrong, mine is right. So, for example, my idea of what the main street should look like was that it should be full of people. It's like a promenade, and there are people there, and there are restaurants. And if you know Bowling Green, and you do, that's not the case. There's nobody in the street. So I thought that was very unnatural. There was something wrong with this city where there's nobody in the street. Where are they? Excuse me. I kept asking. I saw, my brother took me to Columbus to the art museum. We went to a room with contemporary American art. That was very disturbing to me. There was no harmony in it. Each painting was different. It pointed in a different direction. That, for my European sensibility, that was the way it shouldn't be. Then we went to another room, which was a European art, and I felt, okay, I'm home. I can live here. There was a moment when I thought, I can't stay in this country. I don't understand it. This is like seems wrong. The main street in Bowling Green that had many different kinds of buildings on it, not from the same period, not in the same architectural style, but whatever anybody wanted to build. That's how it looked to me. May not have been that way. But to me, that's what it looked like. So I brought this picture of the world and basically encountered this new environment, and we both looked at each other wrong through our own eyes, through our own glasses, without understanding that there is something new to perceive in this new encounter. Neither side could see that. Eventually, because I stayed here, I got to see.
So when did that melding begin to take place exactly?
That is a very good question. I couldn't tell you the exact point. But I think what happened is, for the first 4 or 5 years of my stay here, I would stay 9 months in Bowling Green and 3 months in Belgrade. I would travel. It was kind of like a commuting. And during that time, slowly something happened. And slowly I adjusted. Those glasses that I had on, I like to call them, let's back up a little bit. So there is something that, how people talk about dominant narrative and dominant ideology. I try to call it common narrative and common ideology, so it's not necessarily always dominant, although it turns out to be actually in quite a few cases. So there is this common narrative about what America is and what its role in the world is and what Yugoslavia was and what its role and so on. And it's very hard to go against it. It's hard to tell a story that doesn't conform to it. So that's why at the beginning I had trouble communicating with my environment and they with me. Well, I adjusted so I spoke their language. I don't mean English, I mean their ideological language. But then as I was commuting, things started shifting in my own head. And eventually I was able to take off those glasses when I traveled back home. So what looked like had looked to me like a harmonious environment where everything was from quote unquote our culture without those common narrative glasses. There are many cultures there. Our main street was as strange and as strangely put together as the main street in Bowling Green or New York or anywhere. All these were consisting of little different pieces.
But you did talk about the magic, in a sense, of the Midwest, that there was something in the culture that was very attractive to you, or it really met some part of your epistemological narrative and ideology. There was something very special about the Midwest. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I grew to love Midwest. I still consider Bowling Green my sort of American hometown. I live in LA now. I don't expect to go back to Bowling Green, but that is my hometown. That is what I think of. I am from Ohio. So when I first came here, the people I could relate, not here, but to LA, the people I could relate best with are people from Midwest because we had similar ways of communicating. So what I liked about Midwest is people were extremely nice. in some sense, they were very open-minded. They would listen to you very carefully and they would nod. And there was never friction. Where I come from, there's always friction in communication. People say, yeah, that's not true. In Bowling Green, nobody would say that. They would say, I see your point of view. They may not see it, but they will say it. And in a way, I liked that. And I thought, I liked actually that it was small town. Everybody knew everybody. People were very welcoming. I was so impressed by the willingness of those sort of, I don't know if they were, but regular Americans to accept foreigners in their environment. Well, at least me. I can't vouch for everybody. But so, yeah, I liked it a lot.
But now, going back to art in hotels, what is it that really galvanized your interest to take art and combine it with your observations of the culture and so on? What led you to do that? Was it feeling comfortable enough in the Midwest? Was it a distillation of your energy? What happened that you could do this?
Okay, well, the book wasn't done in Midwest.
Right.
We did the book once we moved to LA.
But is it because you had a common background in the sense that you felt you had a home in the Midwest, so then you wanted to build on that with some art? In other words, how did you come to want to do that book out of the Midwest? How did that bridge occur?
Let me think about it. So the reason we put the book together, maybe that's the way to approach this, is that I didn't see that my experience is addressed anywhere. I could, again, as I said, I was offered many opportunities to fit into the common narrative, which I always turned down, but never really to tell my story until I started, and this was a long time ago, started working on my dissertation, which was about my hometown of Belgrade and its main street and all these things that I saw in it once I took off my glasses. So when I did that, I realized maybe that can be applied to other experiences as well. And so I was looking for a way to do something, in some way address this experience. And now that is maybe a good way to say this is that at the time when all this was happening, I really couldn't talk about it. I couldn't articulate it very well. I couldn't talk to anybody. So what I did, I keep a journal, and in that journal write everything that comes to mind, and I'm completely free, and I can say it in any way, and I can mix languages and not use grammar and not use any capitalization and so on. So when things would happen, I would remember them, I would write them down. And I realized that I'm not seeing something like that. I'm not seeing that point of view anywhere. Anyway, so at some point, my brother, who is an artist, and who paints in an entirely different style. I write in a very narrative, very focused, very sometimes critical or angry, full of details. One detail across the other, one detail on top of another. And he paints this really empty, beautiful landscapes, just with some kind of undertow of something strange underneath. Mm-hmm. So he decided to put together a book of those kinds of paintings that express that something that he couldn't quite name. And we talked about it, and he said, I need a text for it. I said, I have many stories that address that same mood, but do not really name it or do anything more about it. So from my journal, I picked some stories that were already there, and then I worked on them until they fit. And we put that together.
Was it something about, you said when you were a child, you knew that you were going to keep this journal all your life. And could you talk a little bit about that? Because what's interesting about art for hotels is there's an emptiness factor in the rooms and in the photographs. But in the journal, it seems like there's a fullness. So could you discuss a little bit about that?
Yeah, the journal is clutter, and the visuals are completely open, and that was intentional. It was the whole intention of the book was to capture a mood, a feeling, something that we couldn't understand, but could feel and could almost touch. And what we really wanted is not to be that nobody can pick up a book and fold it into one of the common narratives. So it wouldn't be, okay, you came from another country and you succeeded, or you came and you failed, or, whatever that. So none of that should be possible once you finish reading the book and looking at the pictures. Now back to the journal. The journal is sort of, like spiders make webs, they walk and then there's a little thread after them. Mm-hmm. That's what the journal is for me. It's something I do naturally. It's not a plan. It's not like I'm going to write this journal and keep record of everything I think or do or whatever. It's just, things come to me, not in any mysterious supernatural way, but it just occur to me. And I feel I need to write them down. And that has been ever since I could write. And sometimes it's an idea for a story. Other times I read a book and I want to comment on it. Yet other times I had a conversation in the street and that led me to a conclusion on something. Okay, maybe this is a good way to say it. So I have a friend who talks about a third eye, like there is a third eye here, imaginary third eye, that sees everything and watches. So if you imagine, like, my third eye is always watching and always thinking. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. Third eye is there observing you too, this situation, everything that's going on, making up its mind, evaluating, making connections with previous experiences and so on. So this journal is kind of a record of third eye behavior and what third eye sees. So that's what it is. And so it just has to happen.
I wanted to say, is the third eye an omniscient narrator in the sense that it sees everything and encourages you to fill in something about what you see, but you can never be that third eye because you mentioned about the narrative and finding your story and so on.
That's a very interesting question, but I think of the third eye as me.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, that's me observing. It's just that I can be observing and talking at the same time, like everybody. Yeah. I mean, you're doing things and you're thinking about them. You're not.
Because I was going to say, did you feel you were unlike other people when you began writing as a child? Did you think this is my profession or my love or my...
I didn't feel I was unlike other people, but I did know that's something I had to do. Well, this is another interesting thing. I don't know how related it is, but when I was very small, like 3 or 4 years old, I had whole imaginary worlds in my head, like toys that I played with, and they had little cities, and they had names, and they had relationships, whole complete world. And of course, my parents were alarmed initially and took me to a doctor to make sure this is not a sign of some kind of
So when a person goes in a hotel and they see this art on the wall that isn't like in your book, what are you trying to reach? The anonymity of the traveler, the tourist as explorer? How does that relate to, say, if I go book a room in a hotel and I see a very sort of blah picture that doesn't reach me at all, it's just sort of an anonymous situation? How does that relate to what you were trying to do? Is it supposed to answer to those people who travel the world for business, for pleasure, or for what? How do you reach those people in your book?
I wasn't. The idea was not to reach anybody. It was
important.
The purpose was not to reach a certain segment of the population, but to express what that segment of the population might be going through.
Right.
Whether they really are, I don't know.
Yeah.
One just side note I want to make is that all these are my personal experiences. They have no universal validity. Other people might not have had them that way. So just keeping that in mind.
You know, you're showing the audience in a sense that you're an agnostic viewer of your own objective reality in that sense.
Something like that, and I'm showing them what I'm feeling. It doesn't necessarily that they are feeling as well. Some people already have come to me and said, this is exactly what I felt. And some have told me, I really can't relate, or I can relate with this story, but not with that one. So it depends. People from my own country who've had a similar experience of coming here at a similar time, they all relate, because to them that is kind of common. So Now, if we're going to now go and talk about the book, we can do that.
Would you like to read a passage from the book that illustrates something of what we discussed here?
Before we do that, then
Yes.
I'd like to more introduce the book and its concept,
Yes,
if that
of
would
course.
be okay. So the idea of the book is part an art book. It started as an art book, and it has beautiful pictures in it. Part a collection of short stories, because that's my contribution, and a part kind of a Zen meditation, a part of kind of, there is the whole section of the book, and then the whole element of the book that has to do with contemplating your situation and overcoming it in a kind of mindful way. And that would be, so in some sense, you start the reading about these people who have gone through very specific experiences. Mm-hmm. And at that level, you can ask, are they successful? Did they find a new home? Are they happier now? And so on. But there is another level at which you can look at it, and that is, what have I learned? How is my mind better now than it was before? Not how successful am I, but how aware am I? Those kinds of questions. So I think that's the Zen part. You do want to ask your audience to start looking at their own thinking and their own limitations, and see what would happen if you took off those glasses and look at the world without them.
Do you want to discuss the idea between art and reality in the worlds that you are mentioning, and how the academic life for you wasn't quite as satisfying as art was? You did mention that.
I did mention that, and again, I don't want to misspeak here, but in terms of what I want, what gives me joy and pleasure and all that, yeah. I find it better in art. And again, I don't know why that is, but I think the art is better at capturing things that haven't yet been defined, that haven't yet been understood, that we just that are hinted at in the environment, but I can't yet count them. I can't yet say, yeah, this is it, and this is it, and this is it. I just kind of feel it there. And I think there is a large part of life that is that. And I think the art, for me, the art does that.
Do you feel like research is less original?
No. I just feel that it's addressing like a different stage of things. Where you can, it's done at a time when we have more clarity.
Yes.
About something, and some part, not all art, but some art is done before we have had a chance to completely understand what's going on.